How's it going, everybody? If you hear thunder and lightning outside, just kind of ignore it. Storm passing through, or my dog or chicken's freaking out. So I want to do this video because I've never seen anyone do it, probably because everyone doesn't have every knife they've ever really carried, but I do. I plan on cutting down my collection, but I thought I'd do this video first. So most people will buy new knives and do kind of reviews on them on YouTube. You know, they'll probably use it for a week or so and then do a sort of review. All the knives I'm going to show you here, I have carried for at least 6 months to a year, some far longer than that. These are my EDC knives, beginning from when I was about, I'd say, 14. So I'm just going to go get into it right now, and I'll start out with the knives I carry right now. The knives I carry right now are my SOG multi-tool. This is by far the best 90 bucks I've ever spent in my life. I absolutely love this SOG. It's saved my ass a number of times. I've repaired cars on the side of the road with this when I go to machine gun shoots. There seems to always be something that goes wrong that I need one of these tools for. It's just a wonderful knife. My only criticism of it is I really don't need the two knives on there. I actually hardly ever use the knives just to begin with, and I think I've used this serrated knife maybe once. I've used the just straight edge knife quite a bit, but for the most part I don't use the knives on this. I mostly just use the tools and the pliers, which, like I said, have been an absolute lifesaver. I carry this every single day for years now, and it's starting to show a bit of wear, but as you can see, it still looks pretty good. It's a little beat up. The only tool I do not use and do not like is this seatbelt cutter. I'd like to replace that with a saw eventually, but like I said, this is the greatest multi-tool I've ever owned. I've owned Gerber, Leatherman's, and both of those companies have nothing. They can't even hold a candle to SOG. SOG just makes amazing multi-tools. But I carry that every single day. Lifesaver, like I said. And I also carry this SOG. As you can see, I'm kind of a SOG fan. This is the SOG Aegis. My only criticism of this knife is the blade is very thin. It's kind of a thick blade. The blade is very thin, which isn't really a problem. It slices great, but this is kind of a problem for me. I do not like there to be a lot of play in my blades, and yes, I have tightened this down. I have tried to get that out of there, and there just is a little bit of play in it. It's not a huge deal. You don't notice it while you're cutting stuff. It's more of just an annoyance for me, but if I could get rid of that play, I'd be a lot happier. I'm probably going to try a couple more SOG knives just because I'm such a fan of their multi-tool. But if you guys know another company I should try out, I might do that. Now we're going to get into the knives I've carried for years, starting when I was about 14, as I said. This is sort of kind of just a history of my life through knives, I guess. So if you're into that, watch. If you're not. This was my first knife. I have no idea where I got it. I think I got it from my dad's work. It's a Victory Tubing Company. Victory Tube Company, yeah. So I think I got this from my dad's work. Somebody probably gave it to me, but I carried this for years. It was kind of my EDC knife when I was younger. I used it for everything. It's got kind of a thin blade on it. I had another one like it, actually, and I snapped the blade on it. Reason this one is in such poor repair is because it got left outside for a couple days when I lost it. But that was a decent knife. It got me through a couple years. I've always carried a knife. I find knives very useful. They're a great tool, and they are really a tool to me. So that's why some of these knives do not look in absolute pristine condition, because I use them, I beat the crap out of them, and they really got used hard for years. This is another one I carried for a long time after this one. I only carried that one for probably maybe a year and a half. Then I moved on to this one. I like this one just because it's got a nice thick blade to it. It's very easy to work with. It locks up pretty tight, or at least it used to. It's kind of looser now. But as you can see, it's got black marks on it. It's not rust, that's just discoloring from use. I'm really not sure what sort of knife this is. I'm not sure if it's going to come up. It's got a little crown on it. It says Ideal on the blade. I'm not sure where this came from, but it was a nice little knife. It's got kind of a weird second blade. The second blade is a screwdriver. Only right here is sharp, and then it's got kind of a screwdriver here. It's a little too thin to actually use as a heavy-duty screwdriver, but it's kind of interesting. I use that for years. Sometimes I use it out in the garden as well. It's pretty good for cutting up cutting zucchini off the vine. But I carried that one for years. Each time I've moved on to a new knife, I've always upgraded. This one was kind of cheap. It's a little chintzy. So I moved up to a little nicer one, pretty much as I went along. I picked this one up a long time ago. This is a very cheap knife, plastic. It's got an interesting blade to it, but I've had this one around for a long time. I actually use this in the garden. The reason this one kind of maybe looks a little more beat up than the other ones is because I keep this one outside usually. It's hanging on its little loop in the shed, and I actually use it in the garden a lot for cutting up twine to tie up tomatoes and all that kind of stuff. The next one I upgraded to is a little bit nicer. I actually don't know what the make on this one is. I don't know, maybe somebody can tell me. But this is the next one I carried for a while. I think I carried this one for about a year. It's just your average, folder. It's a nice little knife. It's actually in better repair than some of the other ones. It's got 3 knives, I believe. But usually I don't use this one, don't find much of a use for that. This one I'll use in the garden if I have it out, and this is, your main cutting knife or whatever you want to use it for. But it was a nice knife. It served me pretty well. This one's kind of important, though. This is when I moved styles of knives. I used to always have this sort of folder. It didn't really lock up, but I actually changed styles after this. I'm going to go on to the hunting knives that I've used, because that style change is going to be important in a second. The first hunting knife I ever got was a buck knife. This is a buck, I believe it's 470C. It's about as basic as you can get, but I field dressed my first deer with this. It's a great knife. It does seem to be very brittle, though. My brother actually managed to snap his. But it's a great knife, worked very well. I've actually gone back a couple of years and used that again. I'm probably going to get rid of it, though. I don't use it very often, and the ones I have now are just vastly superior. My next hunting knife, actually my next two, because I have to show them in order, basically, was a case. Now, I love this knife. This is a great hunting knife. It's just big enough. You can see the case logo on there. This one was awesome. It worked very well, used it for years. And I also use, well, I should show the other knife on this, actually. It's got kind of a more rounded blade, but very nice blade. This one locks up very tight. I mean, it's very tight. It's very difficult to get it out of there. Like I said, that's going to be important in a second. This one I also used. This one is a charade. Doesn't lock up quite as well. I only use this one for a very short time. I love charades, so I actually have some older antique charades, charade Waldens, but you can see the logo on there. 2 problems with this one, though. It doesn't lock up as well. Well, now I'm having trouble getting it out. Doesn't lock up quite as well. And also, you can see how thick that brass is on there. This thing is ridiculously heavy, even compared to this one, which actually has a slightly larger blade. But the reason I switched this style of knife, because I had these basically at the same time, is because this knife hurt me pretty bad once. I was cutting something with it, and I forget what it was, but I hit the top of the blade, and it snapped down right on my hand and cut me pretty bad. I left a scar for a while. So pretty much I immediately stopped carrying that style of knife. And I actually went back to using this knife as my hunting knife. Kind of scared me away from that locking system for a while. And I believe about that time or shortly afterwards, I switched to using this buck knife as my EDC. I love this knife. It's a buck weight tracker, I believe, 751U. I've looked this up before to see if it's still being made. I don't believe it is. I found one for sale in Australia for 75 Australian dollars. I don't know if that's a lot or not. I didn't look up the exchange rate. But this knife I like a lot because it locks up extremely solid. Like, better than the SOG, surprisingly. I mean, it's rock solid lockup. The reason I went away from this one is because I do not like serrations. They require a special tool to sharpen them. I really don't find a use for them. I've never liked serrations. I prefer just, you know, straight blade. But this was a good knife for a long time. I like carrying it. It was a great knife. I haven't chipped it or damaged it too bad. It held up pretty good. I should say that I've had a number of different knives besides the one you've seen. But those ones I managed to destroy, so they're not here. They didn't pass the test. All of these knives have survived, you know, years of use. The next knife I got was a Leatherman. I really love this Leatherman. It locks up nice and solid, liner lock, very nice knife. It's also kind of a multi-tool, which was, which was always nice. It has a, I'll show you here. Oh, man, that does not want to come out of there. It has a screwdriver there, Phillips head, just a flathead, very useful. I always like that. It's a nice knife. Like I said, I didn't like the serration, so the next one I got was just a straight blade. So that was an upgrade for me, getting rid of those serrations. Also, this one is a little quicker opening. It actually has this little bar here to assist it opening. Not that that's really important to me. The one thing I will say is this is the only thing I've ever liked from Leatherman. I know people love Leatherman multi-tools, but compared to my SOG, I just have never been impressed with them. I've had a Gerber and a Leatherman. The Gerber I gave away to somebody put in their tackle box, and my Leatherman is sitting in a toolbox in the basement, probably rusting. So, didn't carry the Leatherman or the Gerber for very long. Once I found that SOG, pretty much everything went out the window. So that was the next one. Now, my final hunting knife, after I went back to this, is actually a custom. This was made by a friend of mine. He's a blacksmith. And I basically just told him what he wanted, and he whipped out this knife. I'm not so sure I like the, I hope he's not watching, not so sure I like his little indents on the brass, but it's as thick as I wanted it. It's the right size, right grip, nice rosewood wooden grip. I absolutely love this knife. I can't say I'd change anything about it. It's the reason I haven't really bought any newer hunting knives lately. I haven't bought a SOG hunting knife. If I didn't have this, I probably would. But that's basically the progression of my hunting knives right here. I can get it in camera. So, slowly upgraded my hunting knives, slowly progressed from a cheap little, probably $2 knife all the way up to my SOG. Slowly. Now, I should say that the reason these knives are not in the greatest of shape, you know, if you look at even one of my favorites here, this case, it's got some discoloration. It's not in the best shape. Knives are tools to me. I don't baby them. I don't polish them all the time. I put oil on them. I make sure they don't rust too bad. But they are going to discolor. They are going to show some wear. Which is one reason I don't buy extremely expensive knives at the moment. I would absolutely love, because I do love knives, I would absolutely love to have a Damascus knife. I would love to have, you know, probably 3 to 4 inches. I've seen plenty of them with a nice hardwood handle. Seen a lot of beautiful Damascus knives, but I know I'd wear it and I'd destroy it, so It's a reason I don't particularly want to drop $300 on it. I do sometimes buy knives that I just like. I have no use for this. This is a Shadow Tech, okay, I believe. Can't remember which one this is. But anyways, I just like it. So sometimes I do buy knives that I just like, but for the most part I buy knives that I'm actually going to use. Which is why you see these knives here so beat up, is because I used them for years. Every one of these was an EDC knife, like I said, that I've carried for at least 6 months. Most of them for years. They saw hard use and they all survived it. All of them were good knives. A lot of times I see people doing reviews and they just criticize knives and criticize knives. Knives they've only carried for maybe a few weeks without seeing actually how well they handle. These knives are ones that, you know, like I said, I carried for years and they held up. Basically, if you're looking for a knife, I'd say find one that works for you, carry it, see if you like it. If you don't like it, switch knives. I mean, you're going to know what works for you. But other than that, I don't know what to say. That's about all I have for you right now. This is a wonderful knife. If you can find one of these, I highly suggest picking it up. Still love this knife. I should carry it more. But that's all I've got. Thanks for watching.